Welcome to Guns, Guns, Gear, and Guns with Gary Gunderson. I am Gary Gunderson. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments about ATF's frame and receiver rule, better known as the 80% kit ban, and it was as stupid as you would expect.
So the example we give in our reply brief is that a pair of pants is not regulated as a pair of shorts if you have a statute referring to shorts, even though the pants could be readily converted into shorts. That's because pants are a distinct object in their own right, and they have a separate identity.
If anything, I'm glad we finally got a definitive take on the identity of pants at the Supreme Court. It is long overdue. But seriously, pants are super easy to convert into shorts, which goes to a point that was made in opposition to the rule.
Again, as I've said, it could wreak havoc with the firearm laws because there are a lot of things that can be readily converted. A traditional rifle can be converted to a short-barreled rifle in minutes with a hacksaw or by swapping in a shorter barrel.
That is obviously true.
And your question touches on the idea that there might be particular marginal products out there that could test the bounds of whether something is readily convertible. But the court doesn't need to consider those kinds of products in this case because that can all be adjudicated on an as-applied basis going forward. That's right. We certainly don't dispute that it has to be an instrument of combat designed and intended to be used in this way because there are objects out there, toys and tools, that have a well-known non-weapon use but that actually do expel projectiles through the action of an explosive. A cap gun is an example of this. It expels birdshot, and so therefore it would fit within the functional definition, but it's not a weapon because it's not an instrument of combat or intended to be used that way.
Is it?
A cap gun does what now? Expels birdshot, like a shotgun. Lady, I don't know what cap guns you played with as a child, but those were firearms.
Both of those points are consistent with how ATF has interpreted and implemented the Act across 5 decades and 11 different presidential administrations.
Then why did you write the new rule?
They claim that if a firearm isn't 100% functional, if it's missing just one hole that could be drilled in seconds and immediately assembled into a working gun, that product can be sold to anyone online.
Because if you say in the machine gun provision, frame or receiver is also regulated. And if one hole is all that separates a semi-automatic receiver from a machine gun receiver, it's hard to see how the readily standard would not also be applied there.
This is a very important point. Forget about how much the ATF says having a jig is bad. The ATF will prosecute you if you drill a single hole in a standard semi-automatic AR-15 receiver, but needing to drill one hole in a polymer 80 pistol is readily convertible.
How much time is it going to take to make it functional? Do you need special equipment? Do you need to buy parts, and are they readily available? Do you need special skill? So all along, from 1968 on...
She does not answer any of these.
And the only change in the rule, and I want to openly acknowledge this as the rule does, is that ATF is now taking account of jigs or templates, which are a form of tool that quickly speed up the process of making a frame or receiver functional. But as ATF explained in the final rule, that wasn't a change in statutory interpretation.
It is a change, or we wouldn't be here.
I'm not even supposed to be here today.
If what she said were true, the rule would just ban the jigs. It banned everything.
Here's a blank pad, and here's a pen, all right? Is this a grocery list?
I don't think that that's a grocery list, but the reason for that is because there are a lot of things you could use those products for to create something other than a grocery list.
Right,
and so it's not like they're...
If I show you, I put out on a counter some eggs, some chopped up ham, some chopped up pepper and onions, is that a Western omelet?
No, because again, those items have well-known other uses to become something other than an omelet. The key difference here is that these weapon parts kits are designed and intended to be used as instruments of combat, and they have no other conceivable use.
I don't know. I can imagine quite a bit.
I can conceivably purchase a polymer 80 product and use it in an art project, as a prop in a movie, as a boomerang, or a paperweight if I want. There are other conceivable uses.
Inconceivable! You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
General Prelogger, I just want to follow up on Justice Alito's question about the omelet. Would your answer change if you ordered it from HelloFresh and you got a kit and it was like turkey chili, but all of the ingredients are in the kit?
Yes, and I think that that presses on the more apt analogy here, which is that we are not suggesting that scattered components that might have some entirely separate and distinct function could be aggregated and called a weapon in the absence of this kind of evidence that that is their intended purpose and function. But if you bought, from Trader Joe's some omelet-making kit that had all of the ingredients to make the omelet and maybe included whatever you would need to start the fire in order to cook the omelet and had all of that objective indication that that's what's being marketed and sold, we would recognize that for what it is. And it doesn't stretch plain English to say, I bought omelets at the store if you bought all of the ingredients that were intended and designed to make them, especially under statutory language that refers to something like breakfast foods or things that can be readily converted to make breakfast.
Okay, so if you buy eggs and other ingredients, it's not an omelet. But if you slap an omelet sticker on the box, that is an omelet. Uncooked eggs with other ingredients, legally an omelet. Got it. But if I had a restaurant and someone ordered an omelet and I gave that to them, they may think it differently.
As the regulation itself makes clear, you don't even get to the question of asking whether it's readily converted into functional shape unless you have the clearly identifiable unfinished component part. So you have something that is already well along the way to being a frame or receiver, and that's when you would conduct the readily converted inquiry.
So what if we hide it with other pieces that can be cut off, purely on the outside, almost decorative? She seems to be applying the looks like a duck legal theory, so if it looks different, is it okay?
If you're asking whether it would still qualify as a regulated weapon that can be readily converted if it were missing other parts, I think that's a matter of degree, and it presses on what it means to readily convert. It might be fact-specific, so if the part you're missing is something that is super specialized and would be hard to track down or is going to cost you $1 million, that might not be readily converted.
So the government, in all its grace, concedes that if it costs you $1 million to complete a partially completed firearm, it might not be readily convertible. Thanks for the concession. So if it costs me $500,000, would it definitely be readily convertible? That's insane.
So what level of expertise is taken into account? What collection of tools is taken into account? Can you provide any sort of a time limit? How long must it take? Some of us who don't have a lot of mechanical ability have spent hours and hours and hours trying to assemble things that we've purchased.
What the courts, and therefore what the agency has said, is that it is readily converted if if a novice in a fairly quick amount of time can easily and efficiently convert their weapon into function. You asked about outside bounds like time limits. I can tell you that in the case law, the longest period of time that was ever deemed still readily convertible was 8 hours, and the agency has not considered any product greater than 8 hours to be readily convertible. So if that issue were squarely presented, a court might hold that something like a day's work or 8 hours sets an outer bound.
The truth is they don't take the justices' questions into account. Let's say you are not good with your hands.
I'm kind of retarded.
It may take you 9 hours to do something that someone else can do in 2. So is it readily convertible only if you're good with your hands and have experience with these tools built over years and it takes 8 hours?
And then with respect to what the rule would cover, it's clear from the readily convertible analysis that you need to have a process that's fairly quick, easy, and efficient. And so it wouldn't sweep in things that have a lot of other uses and that would require a lot of skill and expertise or time to track down the missing parts to put together.
The absurd thing about this rule is that firearms are certainly more complicated than they were previously, and yet the level of technology and ability to purchase goods from your house, the level of home tools, has made what would be an otherwise difficult and time-consuming task easy. Yes, you can easily get parts. If you had to run an obstacle course to get them, would it no longer be readily convertible? The difficulty to acquire parts is an odd point to bolster your argument. You can make a pipe gun easier than a polymer 80, so if I sold a few pipes, fixtures, and a nail together in a box and called it a pipe gun, would they call that readily convertible and a firearm simply because I boxed it up together?
The first thing that most of the kits require is drilling the holes. Usually it's 6 holes, and you do it with the jig. So you have the product there in the tool, and it removes all of the trial and error or guesswork. You know exactly where to drill in seconds. The second step is to remove the extra plastic blocking tabs. That, again, doesn't require much work at all because you clip them off with a pair of pliers or a box cutter.
Look, I get that it says readily convertible, but the fact that the ATF was looking at allowing these as long as jigs weren't sold with them goes to show how arbitrary this is.
You can file it down with a jig as a template using a metal nail file or using a Dremel rotary tool that a lot of people, especially dog owners, own because it's helpful for trimming your dog's nails.
I mean, okay.
ATF is not trying to hide the ball here. The point of the agency is not a game of gotcha to try to criminally prosecute people.
No, they would rather just shoot you.
And I guess I'm worried about the different concern, which is about the court taking over what Congress may have intended for the agency to do in this situation.
Oh, I wonder what Congress intended the ATF to do in the enforcement of the text of the Gun Control Act of 1968. Oh, well, it looks like they didn't intend for the ATF to do anything, as it did not exist.
Are we to conclude that an agency exceeds its statutory authority whenever it fails to choose what we think is the best meaning of a statutory term?
If that statutory term infringes on rights, then yes.
My friend responded that it's to create a kit that hobbyists can put together. I think that that's a questionable proposition, given that if it only takes 20 minutes, the hobbyist is probably not going to get his money's worth and won't actually have the experience of building a gun.
Who are you to say what joy or self-loathing I get from my abilities or inabilities when it comes to my hobbies, lady?
Joe, you did such a great job. You answered every question. You knew all the facts.
I think it's really notable here that we don't have the major gun manufacturers suing us about this final rule. And the reason for that is because this readily converted standard is the one that has governed their conduct ever since the Gun Control Act was enacted.
That's because the major gun manufacturers are in direct competition with these companies. You moron. It costs money to litigate a point. Gun manufacturers aren't going against the government with their endless coffers of taxpayer money for fun. This is a stupid argument. The whole thing is stupid. We are to believe drilling a third hole in an AR-15 is not readily convertible into a machine gun, but drilling that hole makes it a machine gun. But if one of the other holes is missing, it is readily convertible into a firearm and therefore is already a firearm. It's impossible. I do have to say, though, unfortunately, given the line of questioning from the justices, I think the ATF is going to win on this rule. Even though Chevron was overturned, the Roberts Court is still fairly reluctant to make too many waves. I can see it even going 6-3 with Roberts and Barrett ruling with the moron block. But what do you think will happen? Which arguments are most compelling? Let me know in the comments below. Please be sure to like the video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more content. I also have a Patreon to check out, so take a look and help support the channel. Thanks for watching.